Is it time to talk about the feelings?
Yeah, let's talk about the feelings. We can talk about them.
Disclaimer for the feelings segment of the show. We are, or I am at least, I'm sure you will agree with me, going to ask for your grace, listener. This is a very emotional topic for a lot of really good reasons, and I think everybody has their own set of emotions about this one, which makes it particularly complicated to talk about. Like just AI in general, but especially as it's applying here. So we're going to attempt to talk through some of it today, and we will be talking about it for a long period of time. And so it's going to take time to think about it all, get through it all. So all I ask is try not to assume that because we're talking about something, how it works, or our own feelings about one part or another part, and maybe not yours particular part, that we're not like endorsing anything particularly, right? Like we're just going to talk about how we feel right now, and then we'll listen to what more people have to say, and and we'll move on from there. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Because some people feel like AI is the worst, and some people feel like AI is the best, and like they're very strong feelings.
Any AI means it's the worst, and like every part in between.
Yep.
Can I ask for your grace in allowing me to pull the pin out first?
Go right ahead.
All right. So, I think Apple has built a lot of really interesting features that I really want to use. But they blew it because they created the image generation tools. I am surprised that they did it, and I don't even think they did it well enough to have bothered kicking the anthill or the hornet's nest. Like, when I was watching them show off the beginning of Image Playground, I felt secondhand embarrassment. Like, when you're watching a TV show with a friend or like a loved one, and like you've tried to convince them to watch this show, but then something weird happens in the show, and you can kind of feel that they're a bit like, "Why did you make me watch this show?"
Yeah.
Like I felt that way for when they were creating, especially when they were creating the images of other people. I think that the images that they have made in the cartoonish style that they have chosen, it doesn't look any better than anything else that's out there. It has that kind of weird, gross AI style of cartoon, which doesn't look like the way a human would do it. It's like everything looks really dark. Like it's like a strange kind of thing that now I think that just that style just carries emotional baggage for a lot of people. I think it is incredibly weird to the point that I don't even understand why. Why would you create a system where you could make pictures of other people? Why did that ever leave the whiteboard? Like, let me make pictures of me. Why do I get to make a picture of Jason just because I have photos of Jason? That I can make Jason look like a supervillain, or I could make Jason look sad in the rain. Like, why is that a thing? Like, because you know what? Also, you can just download a bunch of pictures of anyone, and then you can create images of them. Like, just because someone being in your photo library does not give you implicit, granting to create images of them. No one else is doing this. Like, none of Apple's competitors are doing this. Why are they the ones to do this? Like, let me make pictures of me, make my own memoji look better than ever, or like whatever. But the thing that I can't believe is that it doesn't even look good. Like, you did all this stuff and they don't look good. Like, why go to the effort and aggravation for something that now I think is casting a shadow over everything else they're doing? And I just don't know if it was something they needed to do. But then I'm thinking about it and I'm like, well, maybe I'm wrong. Like, maybe it's me that's wrong, because so many people, including so many of my friends, have uploaded their photos to these AI tools to create, like, haha, here's fun me as an 80s character, which I never did any of that because I don't want it. But so maybe I'm the one who's wrong. But like, I just think that this image creation is bad enough. Like, people don't like that. But creating other human beings is like taking their facial features and being able to ask the AI to make an image of them. I feel like it's drawing attention away from everything else. I think it's going to color a lot of the announcement, especially in our circles. I think it's already done that. Like, I've seen so many people say, like, this, like what I said, this looks cool, but I'm not so sure about the image stuff. And like, the emoji are fine when they look good, as I mentioned earlier, but everything else, I just don't know, man. I don't get it.
This was the moment in the keynote where I reacted the most negatively. There was another moment in the Q&A that happened later that I also reacted negatively to, but this is in the moment of the keynote. This is it. And I think that those two things are the two fundamental issues with what Apple announced. So yes, I agree completely. I think this was a mistake. I think this comes from that place that I mentioned earlier. It's the yippee, we're having fun, where you could send pictures to your friends, and here's a picture of my mom as a superhero, and isn't it great? We're having so much fun with our phones. It's so great. And again, maybe we are wrong, and it is not the children who are wrong. Maybe we're right. Maybe we're wrong. I don't like it.
Like,
I don't think it was necessary.
I do think it's fun if it's you. I think it's less fun when it's someone else. I think that's the distinction.
It is interesting that they put it so on rails, and then they said you could take anybody else, because that was my immediate thought, was like, I don't want to see a weird AI cartoon version of me sent back to me. I am not interested in that at all. And I don't love any of this. I mean, the other thing is, so to a slight segue, which is, what are these models trained on? So there was an event a couple hours after the keynote where there was an interview on stage with John Giannandrea and Craig Federighi. It's an Apple, it was on stage at the Steve Jobs Theater, and it was Justine, and I don't think she was, given questions, but it's Apple's venue. They were sort of trying to do John Gruber's talk show, but like with a captive audience of just press, which I'm not a fan. I think it was a big mistake on their part, but inside baseball.
I mean, there was at least information in that would have been great to give to everyone.
Yes, they dropped information. Unfortunately, one of the pieces of information was the question of what were the Apple models trained on, and Craig Federighi said, well, we trained it on the open web, and then also licensed images and licensed content. And in fact, for some of these photo things, Apple commissioned artwork in these styles that they wanted to do and used those as part of the model training, which I thought was like, oh, well, that's an interesting story, right? Of like, oh, we're doing it the right way. But the way he said it, and he tried to caveat it, he really did. But basically what he said is, we're doing things the wrong way and also the right way.
I know.
And that's not good enough, right?
That doesn't mean it's right.
They've licensed all this content from publishers and things, and they've made some visual content, but they also just scrape the internet. Yeah. And it turns out the details are even worse, which is there's an Apple search engine. It's the thing that does things like spotlight searches. And but of course Apple's secretive. So until today, they didn't announce, or yesterday, they didn't announce that there's a new thing you can put on your website that will block Apple from scraping your website for use in generative AI. But until this week, that was not a known thing. And so Apple has been doing what all these other companies have been doing, which is basically saying, if it's on the internet and it's free and open, we can use it to build our model.
Boom.
Now, are they doing that for images? Maybe not. Maybe the images are all licensed. But on that case, and maybe the story will be, well, now that it's out, if anybody puts that in, we will do a retraining at a later date and all that stuff will come out. I mean, maybe that's the case, but it's still opt out where, I mean, who's going to even know
the model's built, like the model's built, and now they're training on new stuff.
Yeah, so if you truly believed that you needed to get the licenses from the news, from the news providers and all the other content providers, then why did you also train your model? I think the answer is expediency. They just did it just like everybody else did. And I think it was Casey Newton who pointed out, like, that statement went by and like, Are we just all okay with the idea that any tech company can take the entire web and all the content on it, and nobody's granted them a license and they can just use it to build a whole system on their devices that they sell?
Very disappointing.
So it is because this is the bottom line is, I think you look at this event, here are my feelings. You look at this event and you think, Apple's trying to do the right thing. However, there are a bunch of extenuating factors. One is they were caught a little flat-footed on some of this stuff, and they're struggling to catch up. And they feel like they're at a disadvantage to some of their arch competitors, and they don't want to blow it. Also, there's the Silicon Valley bubble of whether it's business and investors, or just the peers of the people who work at Apple. AI has been a buzzword, and there's a feeling even among especially among investors and other types in the industry that Apple needs to show that they're not behind. And if you look at the response in those areas, they're very happy that Apple made these announcements. But the challenge is a lot of the things that Apple needed to do, if you wanted to please those people, have these downsides. And so Apple ends up kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, where they're trying to do the right thing, but they also want to be perceived as being in with the cool kids. And what frustrates me is a lot of what they did is exactly the right thing to do. A lot of it is be the adult in the room, do features. Don't just throw things at the wall and say, here's a chat bot, do whatever, but build features and UI, have it be privacy based, have it be on your device. And they went above and beyond. Build a server profile and operating system so that you can offload some of the stuff that can't be done on the device to cloud servers that you control, but you can't look into, and build security in an AI cloud. They did all of that stuff, right? And it's good. This is all to the good. Good job, Apple. Don't go with the bad kids. Don't go to that party with the bad kids. Stay at home and do your homework. And then they're like, but the cool kids invited me to the party, right? And so you end up with this, here's our model that we trained, and here's our generative AI thing that even if it wasn't trained on artists who didn't give their consent, even if it was trained on, stock imagery and things that Apple hired, first off, I think if it was, they would have said so more prominently. That's the part of this is
the open web part.
Some of the stuff they didn't say they didn't, which means they did, right?
Yeah.
Some of that is just that's what it is. So, and even if they did, the way it looks, I just think is unfortunate because it looks like weird AI art that we all know. Mm-hmm. And some of the things I saw somebody point out, and quite rightly, there's this beautiful sketch in the architecture notebook and part of the demo of what this temple looks like. And they're like, yeah, we can circle it and generatively make an image, a photorealistic image of that temple. And it's the sketch was better.
Yeah.
The sketch was nicer.
The sketch had more of I think it was Nevin Morgan.
Who
said that.
And they but we replaced it with a generative thing. It's
great.
So
the thing
that's
is,
my feeling is that
look,
they're trying. And they're trying to thread a needle here where they show, because it isn't just what are your features, it's also show you're in the game and show you're making progress. And it's easy for somebody who doesn't work at Apple and doesn't have stock options and isn't in the industry to say, oh, just ignore all of that. It's hard for them to do it. And I can see that if you've got a fiduciary responsibility, maybe you need to feel you need to demonstrate to the market and to your investors that you do get it. But there are moments, I guess in the end, I don't know if it all could have been avoided, because some of this stuff, the model they're using for Apple Intelligence, it was trained on the open web. It just was. They're going to have to cop to it. But I felt like with the generative, with that image playgrounds especially, they didn't need to do that. They could have left it at the Genmojis, and it would have been fine. I don't think everybody was like, oh, they need their own DALL-E, right? No. Let ChatGPT do that stuff. You just stay away from it. And there are moments where they just got tempted.
Yep.
They're like, oh, we could do this. And those are the ones that I think, that eventually they're going to wish they could have had back.
Let's go back to the text, right? Because that's the open web stuff. That's where I think they're talking about specifically text, right? They went out, they scraped the internet with their robots, and they created their large language learning model.
Yeah.
Maybe, look, I'm not the smart one here, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, the only way that you can do this is to do that. But I had still hoped that they would do something different. Like, I understand. What I say is, I understand that might be the only way that you can do it and be good. Like, I understand that might just be it. But I had hoped that the richest, or second richest company in the world had the ability to do it differently. And you know what? Maybe they would have if they wouldn't have started on this stuff 9 months ago or whatever. Like, but it just bugs me that the whole time we've been leading up to this, there's just been this thing in my mind where I'm like, surely they'll do it differently. Like, it kind of wasn't really a thought in my mind that they would have just done it like everybody else did. But it really seems like they just did it how everyone else did. But they sprinkled some nice stuff on top, like hiring some artists. Like, all right, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Good.
And again, maybe it's true that nobody cares, but I care, right? Like, I don't think building your feature on content you don't own that they haven't given you an explicit right to do is, I question whether that's the right thing to do. And it especially bothers me with artists. And maybe the answer is that, nobody else cares and it's fine. But I think that's an esoteric point in some ways. I think the larger point is not like just that they're taking content, but it's that, a lot of the tenor of AI stuff is, you don't even need to use an artist anymore. You can just use an AI thing to build art for you and don't pay an artist. And I think Apple didn't step in that. I think Apple's Image Playgrounds thing is very much like, this is just for messing around with friends. And there's a reason for that. Like, that said, they did put it in the keynote. I was like, don't know so much about that, but they were trying to soft pedal it. But again, my feeling is some of this was probably inevitable because of the way the tech world is going, and that Apple needed to show that it was in the game. James Thompson just said in our Discord, oh no, a $3.1 trillion company might be a $2.9 trillion company. But it's like the incentives are misaligned. The people who run Apple are, have stock options. Their incentive, at least in part, is to, keep the stock up. And we all want Apple to be better than that, right? And I think that Apple has core beliefs, and Apple does a better job than most companies at following them. But there are limits. And like, AI is very energy intensive, and they want to talk about leaving the world a better place and having, being able to offset all of the energy use of their devices. But like, it doesn't change the fact that if you're loading your device up with AI models, you're going to be using a lot of power on devices that will then need to be charged. And you're going to use a lot of power in the data center. Even if you're using efficient Apple Silicon servers, they're still using a lot of power. And like, there comes a moment where they're like, yeah, we know, but we feel we gotta do this. Like, this is the time. We can't let this go. And I think in the long run, what they may be thinking is, if we let this go, it might be an existential crisis for Apple. That if Android leans into this stuff and it proves to be a game changer, it's not going to matter that Apple stuck up for what was right, because Apple will go out of business because the iPhone will be killed by Android. And I know that's an extreme view, but I can see why people at Apple would feel that way.
I genuinely believe we are at the first time in the history of the iPhone where that has actually become a possibility. I believe that is a possibility. That if Apple said, we're not doing this, then they run the risk of losing their business from the iPhone. Because, and as you're saying about the incentives, you said about the incentives thing, like I understand, they maybe, and I understand the idea that they care about Wall Street and Wall Street care that, like, I get that. I also imagine a scenario where the incentives of, we want to be the best technology company in the world for consumers. I believe today that does include AI, because people want these features, and they want them more and they want them faster. You can see how these apps, these services are being used, and they are being used by people that do not listen to this show. And
right,
like, they need to be in this world. I think we both just hoped that they would. Because this is the thing which annoys me. So many of the things we've spoken about in this episode are the exact example of doing things the Apple way, but then they did some stuff not their way. And
that's right.
And that's what overshadows everything, because you did things bad ways and not even really good enough. So what was the point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if we're down on some of this stuff, and like image playgrounds, I don't like it. I don't like the idea of it. I just don't like it. I think that the whole generative image thing, like Genmoji, is as far as I'm willing to go right now.
Too.
The other, I would say, so the little ray of sunshine here is, if you are somebody who believes, as I've heard lots of people say this week, that AI hype is like Bitcoin hype. It's like blockchain hype. It's just another thing that the tech industry is doing to get a bunch of suckers on board and make a lot of money, and then it's not going to pan out either, and they're going to leave other people holding the bag, and the tech people are going to count their money and go on to the next Ponzi scheme that they're going to do next, whatever it is. Okay. I'm not convinced that general knowledge AI chatbots are going to take off. Like, I think that there is definitely an argument that there are limits to what they're doing, and that what seems like exponential growth now may in 2 or 3 years prove to have been a mirage, and that they can't stop hallucinating and they don't get a lot better. Okay. However, if you're Apple, you got to hedge. What if they are? And so they're probably building their own internally in case they need to no longer partner with OpenAI, right? But they put OpenAI in there. They put ChatGPT in there. They're like, all right, well, you know what? In 2 or 3 years, if this doesn't pan out and it's all dumb, they'll just take it out, because they've got their other models. And if their other models are more limited, and it turns out that that's actually what the future is a whole bunch of limited models that are focused on things like your user's data set and your context, and that there are other ways to get the knowledge out there, but the GPTs of the world are never going to be that great, amazing artificial intelligence dream, then great. Like, they will have not particularly integrated ChatGPT or others into the operating system. It's at arm's length. And if it's a big nothing, it'll be a big nothing, and it'll fall away. If it's huge, they can't be late to it. So I think there are reasons for some people to be disappointed in Apple this week, even though I think a lot of what they did is absolutely the most Apple-like thing they could choose to do. But I think there are places where Apple has said, we gotta be careful here, because if we are left too far behind, we will never catch up. And so when you see them do things that might disappoint you, I think that's one of the things that's going on. But what I didn't see is them betting the house on it, right? I didn't see them saying, yes, ChatGPT is the future. Oh my God, everything. They're like, you could use it if you want, and we'll warn you, and we'll put a warning label even after we warn you that we're using them about the results being unreliable, but we're going to do it. And that is them, like, because the fact is, and people are like, well, they should just not do that. So the fact is, some people do want that. Some people want that stuff and use that stuff, and you don't have to like it, but at this point, it may be more like a dangerous toy, but it's a toy that some people want to play with, and that Apple can't say no, because maybe it's more than a toy. And if it turns out just to be a dangerous toy that doesn't grow and change and improve, I firmly believe they will back away from it entirely. But they can't afford to pretend it doesn't exist. And so you're left with this cognitive dissonance, which is Apple's doing some stuff the right way, and then you look at this other stuff and you're like, well, what the heck, Apple? What's that about? And they're like, yeah, well, got to do that too. And that is the contradiction of this entire thing.
Shall we leave that here for this week?
Sure. I'm sure we'll get a lot of feedback, and we'll chew it over, and we'll have more thoughts down the road.
I know that my thoughts are changing on over these almost 6 hourly basis right now. So there's going to be more stuff that comes out. There's going to be more interviews, and there's going to be more thoughts. But I think for now, I think me and you, at least I feel like I've said the main things I wanted to say today.
Yeah. I have one more thing to say, which is I am as tired as everybody else is of people saying that AI chatbots are the future and that if you don't have them, you're behind, and that they're obviously going to change the world, because I have great skepticism about that. And I think it's good to be skeptical. Yeah. Maybe they will, or maybe not. I also am tired of people who view all machine learning and AI stuff as a con and a scam that doesn't have value, because that's not true either. And I see those people out there too. And I'm just tired of that too. Like, the reaction in some circles to the stuff that Apple announced is like, Apple announced that they realize they need to make Siri a lot better and contextual and understand what you've been talking about with them, and saying, hey, do this thing now and send it to that guy and have that actually work. Like, that's good. And there are a bunch of other good features that are tried and true. So I would say not all machine learning and AI is the same. Not all machine learning and AI stuff is fundamentally inhuman and unreliable. Not all AI and machine learning is coming for our jobs or to kill all humans or whatever. It's complicated, and there's good and bad. And I think my frustrations with some of what Apple has announced is that I think some of what Apple's doing is leaning into the bad because they feel they have to. But there's also a lot where they're trying to do the right thing. And like the private cloud thing, the private cloud compute is amazing, right? That is a huge amount of work, a huge endeavor that they've undertaken to try to get the benefit of big AI features for users without basically selling them out. And that is to be commended, I think, based on what we know now. But I guess what I'm just saying is it's complicated. And so let's all kind of keep an open mind to the fact that some of this stuff is probably good and some of it is bad, and that the best thing to do is try to pick apart, as difficult as that is, what's good and what's bad. And we'll see where it goes. Hopefully someplace good, hopefully not someplace terrible, but we'll see.
Yeah, I do believe that the future of technology is based on technology built on large language models. That's not a chatbot necessarily. Maybe that is, but I think a lot of the stuff that I love that is in Apple Intelligence is exactly that. They're building a model of my own stuff and helping me pick things out of it. It's not a chatbot. It's just doing things on my device. I think it is like that is like it's an underpinning to the next level of technology, but it's not got to be chatbots. Or maybe chatbots become so incredible that maybe it's chatbots. But I think I'm with you, which is like, it doesn't mean it's all good. It doesn't mean it's all bad. But like this is where we're going. And so I think that there is something about trying to find the thing that you like. I think we've got to try and find some things that are of use to us. Or you can say, I don't want anything to do with any of this, but it really does mean, I think, that it kind of steps you out of technology a little bit now. And maybe you're okay with that, but I know I'm not, because it's what I love.
Yeah, Apple's walking a tightrope here. That's the other thing, I guess, to keep in mind is that Apple and Apple's executives can't just say, oh, no, we're not going to do that. Like, there would be deep consequences to that. And they're trying to not just do the right thing, but also make sure that the business continues to exist and battle all existential threats. And if you believe that the car was sort of a, well, what if, let's spend our money on it, and especially the Vision Pro is a, but what if they replace the iPhone with glasses, we need to be there and be our own replacement if that's the case. Well, AI is one of those. It is an existential threat too. If you make an iPhone, how do you is it not relevant anymore if apps don't matter because everything's just run by the AI? And like, that's bad for Apple. So they're like, okay, we have to be a part of that too. And we might not like it, but that's just, that's part of what they have to do.